Members, we have already formed a quorum. It is also time to start. We'll have the second session. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong is not present. Fernando Cheng, it's your turn. I've just spoken. Mr. Gary Chen. I didn't intend to speak, but then a member mentioned that during the last session, the day members did not vote. To clarify for the sake of the record, we didn't actually participate in the voting concerning this matter. That's because in relation to the cost, in relation to the site selection, we were concerned as to whether the administration would be competing with the private sector. So we raised a number of concerns, and therefore we wondered whether it would be advisable to pause and think. Yes, of course, we know that we can't afford to wait. Every day we have 3,000 tons of food waste going to the landfill. At that time, we were in a difficult position. We didn't take part in the voting. The Bureau, the Secretary for the Environment, the Undersecretary, and others have been lobbied by have lobbied the DAB as well as other groups. Maybe I've been reading a lot of papers, and in fact the questions that we asked last time were quite fully answered in this paper. And I'm referring to paper 49. Say last time we asked why $300 million and not $1.5 billion, cost effectiveness, selection of technology, site selection, etc. All our questions have been answered, and therefore our previous concerns have already been given a very detailed answer and addressed, and therefore we are going to vote in favor of this item, and we do not support the adjournment today. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, of course, they have changed. If you say that the legislature is not about politics, then it is a waste of time. Mr. Wong, Secretary. The other day, I met you outside the conference room. You said that it's urgent, and then I said that I would give you the vote. I didn't go on holiday. I was in Hong Kong all the time. Why didn't you approach me? For my mobile phone, I have it on round the clock. So does it mean that you don't care about my vote? This is quite laughable. Mr. Chairman, why don't you sing a song? Last time you said that it could be done for $300 million. So they say they are calling the bluff. In other words, they're saying that you were talking nonsense. Had you not been assuming the post of the chairman, you would have beaten them up. We have been told that it's a global tendering exercise. Please explain. You haven't explained this point in the paper. Is it really the case? Because I know that the wife of C.Y. Leung is also working on food waste. Like husband, like wife, you may say that they have the same personality. Like in the case of Paul Chen, in the scandal or defamation case, both husband and wife went to the court. She declared that her husband is a legislator. Now you say that it is a matter of life and death, even if it is late by 1 day. So, Mr. Wang, I give you 5 seconds. Is it global tendering a matter of yes or no? Lan Kwok Hong, it's not a time for you to ask him questions. I give you 3 minutes to tell us whether you are in support or not. Later on, they will be given time. I want to know whether there was a global tendering. If yes, details. If no, also the details. But don't say yes but. Global tendering. Did you rely on a crystal ball? Well, such questions won't be answered by them. And please also tell us whether the wife of C.Y. Leung is involved, because she has told us that she works on food waste. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, I recall that the last time we discussed the food waste or the organic waste treatment facility, it was suspended because we heard that you said it would be possible to do it for a budget of $300 million. I think the government's paper is confusing. Mr. Chairman, when you talked about the plant in Taipo, it's a 200-ton capacity occupying 8,000 meters square. In paragraph 5, it is said that, sorry, it can only produce between 30 to 90 tons because they can't give you that much land. Now, the government hasn't really said that it is not possible to run it as a private facility. The only thing is that the size of the land is smaller. So I want to know whether if we can get 8,000 meters square as the available space, you can still have it done on a budget of $300 million by a private operator. In this case, it is important to suspend or to adjourn the discussion. Now, Mr. Chairman, you are very experienced in the trade. Well, on that day, members became very interested in the idea that you raised, Mr. Chairman. This is because, given the background, we thought that maybe it would be a good idea to adjourn the discussion so that the administration can give us more information so as to compare the cost effectiveness. Now, even if we just take a step back, in Tuen Mun, we have got a plant producing 100 tons of fish feed. So I think we need to compare the different options. We should look at the cost effectiveness so that we can be given the details to form a judgment, so that we can convince ourselves that it is worth the money to spend $1.5 billion. However, the report has only vaguely given us some scanty information. This is very disappointing. Since July, 3 months have already passed, and yet you are not able to give us the information. You simply say that the private proponent hasn't come back to you further. They are not willing to give you the information, or you haven't asked a very detailed question. Please tell us why. So I support the proposal to adjourn the discussion. Richard Yen, I support the motion to adjourn the discussion along the same line as my proposal to adjourn the proceedings of the FC as a whole. What is before us is a political issue, and so we need to seek a political solution. If we don't resolve the political impasse, everything else would be meaningless. For the livelihood issues, I think we should take a fresh look of the order of the agenda. We must have a consensus as to which should be given priority treatment. So I think we should rearrange the agenda items. We should have an agreement on the priorities, and then it will be easier for us to solve the problems. Just now, the DB and the FTU have spoken. I don't know whether they have wronged the secretary. it appears that you haven't done your job well. I think in July we supported the administration, but then it seems that you haven't talked to them prior to July. It seems that they knew nothing about it before the July meeting.
No, Chair Ken said that there was no voting. I don't know what he was thinking. It was made out as if you didn't talk to us and then you talked to them later. Were you derelict in your duty? I don't think so. I believe you discussed with them in advance and you got their support in advance, and suddenly they reversed their support. So you have been let down by them. Now, if the matter was resolved in July, then all this, we don't have the problem now. Now, the chairman said 300 million is okay. He can try to convince us, and then we can start the discussion anew. That's what he said, 300 million. So we are ready to listen. So the administration has not properly communicated with them. Now, if they had listened to us, now I would like to listen to the secretary. Was it that there was an agreement and then you were sold out? Now, the Labour Party does want to resolve the kitchen waste issue. That should have precedence over the 3 landfills. When we handle the kitchen waste, then you can recycle and Cheng Kwok Chu. Now, apart from there being some controversy on the cost of the kitchen waste facility, on whether a lot of money can be saved. Now, I think it's very difficult to change the order of the items and put the letter items in front. Now, the letter items are all about the welfare, so we waited for them a long time. It seems that we have to wait a long time before the 6th item, the Anderson quarry, Anderson site, RCH and the daycare unit. We want that to be completed earlier. Item number 7, the computerization of the social welfare department. Now, we know that last time there was a computer problem, so the allowance for the elderly was hamstrung, and we should remodel the IT infrastructure so that the elderly don't have to wait 3 months every year when there's a cost of living adjustment. And also, I think the council and we are not against the low-income family allowance. Now, that's in item 9. Now, if we cannot pass the operational expenditure for the student aid and working family office, now it wouldn't be very helpful at all. And item number 10, also an IT item, is also for low-income family allowance. Now, if we pass one but not the other, then the allowance may not come to fruition by end of next year or even early the year after. And also, civil servants paid. There are over 200,000 civil servants, and of course we will pass the item. Your time is up, Ms. Emily Lau. The Secretary is aware that our attention or our hearts are not here. Our hearts are in the plaza outside. Now, we asked many questions for the Secretary to answer, but we are even more anxious that the administration should commence dialogue with the students and the others. So that's why we say we should not take this item right now. We all know that the members are concerned. The items waiting to be dealt with. So that's why we said we should deal with the urgent items first. We want to give the administration the message that the Pan-Democrats are concerned about certain items, and you should pass this message to your colleagues. That's why I tell my colleagues that we should adjourn this item. Mr. Frederick Fung, it's just an extension on the topic earlier. Now, the student movement is now at such a stage that our hearts are with the students. Now, if you want to discuss this controversial issue, it's not very helpful, and people are likely to get emotional and raise all sorts of issues. So it's going to be difficult. Now, we now see some possibilities about a talk between the government and the students. Now, we don't know what the results might be, but it can be said to be a good start. So can we leave these controversial items till later? Now, of course, I'm waiting to hear from the chairman. You said it's 300 million versus 1.5 billion by the government. Now, of course, we're not trying to put you on the spot, but you are an experienced businessman, so I have faith in your figure. Now, can the Secretary contradict the chairman? Now, we need that information. Otherwise, I would like you to withdraw the document. Also, I think we should deal with the easy items first. The easy items are the items that even Pan-Democrats agree, but you try to put those items at the back. Now, of course, we hope the chairman will help. Now, perhaps after the meeting, you can talk to the Pan-Democrats on whether the items can be reshuffled so that the easy items can be passed. Now, there is difficulty. Last time I was inclined to give my support, but I asked the trade. There are many, or the industry, there are many questions. Between last time and now, I have gotten a lot of information. Now, I want the easy items to be passed first, and then we can ask all the other questions. Any other members want to ask questions? Gary Fan. Thank you, Chairman. The administration wants to adopt an executive-led stance, so it's in fact trying to defend its hegemony. Now, we have tried to reach consensus or agreement on controversial issues. We asked the administration to reshuffle the order of the agenda items so that we can deal with the easy ones first. Now, this is what we are dealing with now, but the position adopted by the government all along is totally unyielding. Now, the government has enough votes from the pro-establishment camp, so it shows no sincerity to in wishing concerning this reshuffling of order. Now the Pan-Democrats use the scope in the procedures for us to continue confrontation here, so that we adopt this uncooperative approach as a means to strike back on behalf of those who are in this struggle outside. Now, the people's power has been cut, so we try to stand in the way of these items, and we try to get response from the administration where conditions are unsatisfactory. Now, whether it's the Northeastern New Territories project or these landfills, these unpopular items, the government has not learned the lesson. So we are standing alongside the public, and I support Mr. Chen Chi-chun's motion. Mr. Albert Chen. On issues concerning kitchen waste, now I have talked about this to the Secretary and his 2 or 3 predecessors for many years. Now, on the government policy on kitchen waste, there are serious faults. Now, apart from faults in design, recently, given the $50 million questionable funds in respect of C.Y. Leung, there are also other issues that worry us. Now, on kitchen waste, many members here and organizations to which they are closely related have interest in some of these projects. Now, I think 20 or 30 members of the pro-establishment camp and the related organizations are involved in these interests. Now, so this is a potential time bomb for more scandals. Now, the wife of the CE was interested in forming a company to deal with kitchen waste, but after there were adverse comments, she withdrew the idea. Now, CE, Paul Chen, they established foreign companies that are tied to each other, but you never get the information. Now, unless our motherland does certain things. Now, for this project, now you have to deal with it on a holistic approach, separation of waste at source, etc. Now, you have to deal with that before you deal with the OWTC. Now, on the Lantau project for power generation, I asked many green groups. Now, your project is 10 or 20 years behind the rest of the world. Now, can you tell me whether there are any other countries in the past 2 or 3 years that adopt such an approach as the development approach. Your time is up, Mr. Alan Leong. I think it's very difficult, given this environment, to ask that the Council operate as normal. Now, the Chairman has heard many members. Some of the items are indeed uncontroversial. For instance, civil servant pay adjustment, lottery fund for computerization, etc. I don't see any controversy about these items. Now, if you want to lower the temperature, then it's certainly better to pass some of these items so that everybody would be happy that the legislature has approved some funds. So I do not intend to offend you regarding your decision. Now, you have decided for the items to proceed in the present order, but the circumstances are such that the practice has been for the legislature to adopt the order presented by the administration, but that is no longer applicable, really. Now, you can set a precedent, so you can consider you can gather the views of the FC members on which items on the agenda are not controversial at all and which can be passed quickly. When you have that information, then you can seek an understanding from the administration if they want to insist on the 3 landfills and the treatment plant and the kitchen waste plant. If they have special reasons why these should take precedence over civil servant pay adjustment, and having listened to both sides, then you can come to a ruling. Now, that ruling may take into account the circumstances and set a precedent for the future. So, please consider my proposal. Are there other members who want to speak? The Secretary, do you want to respond? No response. Chen Chi-chun, you have 1 minute. Thank you, Chairman. I don't know whether you went to the occupied area. They have a humanitarian channel for ambulances, etc. The channels will be cleared very quickly for the ambulances to pass. Now, I move the motion to adjourn. I'm also trying to create a humanitarian channel. The environmental agenda items are the roadblocks to civil service pay adjustment and other non-controversial items. Can we cooperate between the two sides to come up with a humanitarian channel for low-income family allowance and civil service pay adjustment? Can we break with the practice? I'm sure we will win the applause of the public. Even the pro-establishment camp would applaud. Maybe the SAR administration would blame you. I now put the following motion to a vote. This committee considers that concerning the adjournment for the FCR 14, 15, 49, those in favor, please raise your hands. We will have a division. The division bell shall ring for 5 minutes.
我哋要投票啦。
We can start voting now. Let us start voting. Before I announce the result, please check your vote again. Voting stops. Let us display the result. 20 votes for, 34 votes against. I declare that the motion is negative. Mr. Frederick Fong. Let us go back to the item. Well, Chairman, my heart is outside, so I'm a bit lost. I have a question, Chairman. Now we are talking about food waste. Ms. Sitho, I'm sorry, Mr. Frederick Ho. Ms. Sitho raises his hand. Well, I don't know whether it's a point of order. It's about declaration of interest. When I spoke just now, I also mentioned it. We have heard many times that the chairman is engaged in the recycling of waste oil. I think you should ask the deputy chairman to chair this item discussion instead of you. The recycling of waste oil has nothing to do with the recycling of food waste. Oil is oil, food is food. So they are not directly related, and there's no conflict of interest. So you have declared your interest, Chairman. I don't think this is a declaration of interest. I do not need to declare my interest because there's no interest involved. But to answer your question, several months ago I said in this council that I was studying with a company trying to find out whether we can do recycling of waste oil business, but we haven't formed a company, no matter whether it's in Hong Kong or overseas. We just looked at the possibility of it, and we also looked at the possible location. At that time, we conducted a costing analysis, and it's about $300 million. We thought that was viable, and that could also handle 200 tons of food waste. At that time, I haven't looked at the figures yet, and I was not sitting on PwC, and I was not in the environmental affairs panel. In July, I said that I had been looking at this for several years, but the government had been rejecting me, so I was not interested anymore. I am pretty old now, though, so I think I have answered your question, and you don't have to be so concerned anymore. Thank you for your clarification. Mr. Frederick Fong. I'll let you start from the beginning. We'll restart the counter. Chairman, is it my turn? Yes. Turn on Mr. Fong's microphone. You owe me 12 seconds. I'll give you 13 seconds. Chairman, about food waste and its treatment. Well, after the food waste is treated and it will be used for compost, but it's very complicated because if you grow flowers, vegetables, and trees, the compost will be different. You need different compositions, different elements. And the machines involved are quite sophisticated.
And some people are saying that food waste can be turned into fish feed. That's simpler, and the machine cost would be lower. So why has the government chosen to do composting instead of producing fish feed? Maybe I can answer this question. We have conducted a feasibility study. We have looked at different options. In February, we issued a 10-year plan for food waste. It's up to 2022. We have also talked about fish feed. And now we will be producing a biogas, and also composting will be conducted as well. With regard to composting, we have to abide by the Hong Kong composting standards, and that's set by the Hong Kong Organic Resources Center. And at Kowloon Bay, we already have a trial laboratory, and the composting results has been quite satisfactory. Some NGOs and schools have been using our compost, and they think that that's a good product for their plants. Mr. Fong? Oh, you need to find markets. After doing the composting, I'm sorry, I have a coarse throat. When you do composting, if you want to turn it into a product, actually the Hong Kong market is very small because we do not have many farmlands. If you sell it to the mainland, their own products are cheaper, and if you sell it to overseas countries, transport will be very costly. In Hong Kong, we have fish farms, and we have more fish farms than farmlands. So why don't we choose to produce fish feed? As for fish feed, there is already a factory in Hong Kong doing that. That is turning food waste into fish feed, but it is of a small scale. It's about 10 to 20 tons. And at the Environment Park, we also have a company that's turning food waste into protein supplements. And each day it can handle 100 tons. But fish feed is subject to fluctuation in markets, and also Hong Kong's market is small. If we do fish feed, we can only handle 30 tons of food waste a day, but we want to handle 800 tons. So in our plan, we will be turning waste into energy. Our power will be generated. It can be transmitted to the grid, and that would definitely be useful. Ms. Fong? Now you will have 5 OWTFs. And will all the food products be taken up by the market? Well, about composting, we have made a calculation. Each year we can use 20,000 tons. As for the OWTFs, each year we can generate 7,000 tons. So it can be absorbed by the market. It can also be used to produce biogas. It's not just for power generation. You still have 10 seconds. Then I'll wait for the next round. Mr. Lo Wai Kwok, thank you, Chairman. At the EA panel, we also discussed about OWTFs, and I remember it was supported by the members then. EA panel members thought that the pace of building the OWTFs was slow. Now we have over 9,000 tons of municipal solid waste, and 1/3 of in Hong Kong daily, and 1/3 of them is food waste. And now you're only handling 200 tons. And we also have food waste from homes, from households. So we hope that there can be a longer-term plan for handling food waste. And we hope that the Silho 1 OWTL can be commissioned as soon as possible. Well, at the PWSC meeting, we talked about a $1.5 billion cost. We had a lot of discussions about that, and many PWSC members raised questions. The government had an estimate of $500 million in the early stage. I was the chairman of the PWSC, so I remember this very clearly. So when it comes to the cost, can $300 million solve the problem? At that time, I had an answer in my mind. Why? Now the government says it will cost $1.5 billion. As for the core facilities of handling food waste, it's $300 million. Members say that another private sector company says that $300 million will be enough. I think actually the government's paper explains this clearly, because even for that private company, the $300 million are for the core facilities only. So they are similar to the government's proposal. For the whole OWTF, we understand that we need to do other things, for example, site formation, constructing buildings, sewage treatment, heat recovery. So at the EA panel and PWSC, a lot of questions have already been asked. If members are trying to initiate this non-cooperation movement and further delay is caused to this project, it will definitely not benefit the people, this council, and the engineering sector. The engineering sector may not be directly involved in this project, but if politicization affects the progress of such projects, it would be pathetic. Some members say that now the tendering exercise is postponed. Can it be further postponed? But Chairman, you would also understand this. It would be very difficult for tenderers to do this because costs go up all the time. If the deadline cannot be extended anymore, then there will be more delays and it will be more costly, and society has to pay. I have a question concerning power generation. Your time is up, Mr. Lo Wai Kwok. Please wait for a second round. Mr. Leung Chi-chang. Mr. Leung Chi-chang is not here. Mr. Leung Sing. Thank you, Chairman. I understand that some members, or for some members, their hearts may not be here. But for the benefits of the people, I think we have to expedite our progress, and we have to be more focused. I would like to ask questions concerning finances. As for tendering, is there a test for the tenderer's financial capability, because this is a project of over $1 billion. So do the tenderers have enough financial capability? Otherwise, they may not be able to complete the project satisfactorily. And on page 4 of the paper, point 9, you say that there will be a public and competitive tendering exercise, and there would not be a pre-screening. If that is the case, I would be worried. If the tenderer is not financially capable, then it would not be screened out.
Mr. Au, I've said that there is no pre-qualification, but then in the tendering exercise there will be adequate assessment about the technical and the financial capability. the Secretary is right. There's no pre-qualification. But after receiving the bids, there will be a vigorous assessment about the financial as well as the technical capabilities. It is a very vigorous mechanism. We do attach a lot of importance to this requirement. Mr. Umlang Singh, for the Housing Authority, we have a ratio between the financial and the technical scores. Can you tell us? It's a 50-50 split, 50% for technical capability, 50% for financial. Another question, probably it was asked by other members, but then they might have other reasons behind the question. In Asia, I want to know which countries, and I believe that we have visited Japan in the past. Please at least tell us about how food waste is being treated in other Asian countries. Probably we are more comparable to the Asian neighbors. For the European and Western countries, the food waste is different. So can you not tell us about the unit cost for the treatment of food waste? Recently, we went to Korea. I think South Korea is quite similar to the case of Hong Kong. They have a resource center, and the capacity is 98 tons a day. And then the cost is about $440 million. But of course, it all depends on the local circumstances, and it will differ. But then our cost is comparable to similar facilities. Can you give me the figure again? 98 tons a day, costing about $440 million. Your time is up. But then that's just for the anaerobic digestion facility, not including the composting side. Is it whole? Not yet here. Mr. Wuchiwai then. Let me take this opportunity to invite the Bureau to give us detailed information about the few paragraphs in the supplementary paper. Now, the private plant will cost $300 million. If you can't give us detailed information about that part, there will still be some suspicion in our mind, that is whether we are really achieving cost effectiveness in granting the fund request. So I want to give the Bureau sufficient time to explain this matter. And also, please give us a cost analysis. We have got a 100-ton plant to produce fish feed, and then this OWTF will have capacity of 200 tons. Please tell us about the cost as well as the performance, and I'll have other follow-up questions. For the cost, $300 million vis-a-vis $1.5 billion. Well, we're talking about different stages. We had the feasibility study in 2008, 2010, EIA completed, so we were more specific about the figures, and we have also called tender. For the two projects, they are not sort of comparable. We have a two-step process. They have only got the anaerobic digestion. For us, we're composting and energy generation. The location is also different. We are in Silho 1. For that one in Taipo, it is near to the utility mains, so it is not right to compare the two. We've also got a EIA study, so we have got a very comprehensive environmental control measures. As to fish feed, it all depends on how much the market can take. For the facility in Echo Park, they turn the food waste into protein additives, not directly into fish feed. They're still assembling the plant, and then they need to test the plant and they have to test the market. It all depends on how much the market can take on. We don't think that the local market can absorb all the products produced, so just a few dozens of tons, but then they can also look at the mini market. The Bureau has always emphasized that the two concepts cannot be compared, but then for the $300 million concept, if we just transplant it onto Silho 1, then we can make comparisons and then it will be fair. I think the public would like to know about the information and technology that you possess. We don't want to have anything vague. Of course, we know that you are not comparing like with like. Bureau. Now, if we group together the anaerobic digestion facilities, and as mentioned in paragraph 7, it will cost $240 million. Just for this digestion facility, it will mean $546 per ton. You get the details in paragraph 8 to assist Mr. Wu to understand. I left behind some letters to show you the figures. Well, I don't quite, I'm not quite satisfied with what Mr. Au has explained. If you care to read my second letter, I asked this question. First of all, there is a sewage treatment plant in Silho 1. I asked why you cannot just connect the pipe. Now, they have come back to say that the EIA study suggests that there should be its in-house sewage treatment plant. For the site selected in Taipo, it is already served by the sewage drains. And then there will be gas to be generated. It can be sold. Now they are trying to turn the waste into energy. And then certainly a number of you have asked a similar question, including Patrick Fung. They have composting. We are going to generate sludge after burning the waste, and then we don't need to have it compost as a compost product. Now, we think that their plant is going to be costly, but they say not. For us businessmen, as long as it is safe, then we don't care about other standards and we don't want to make it too sort of fancy. So I just want to help you to understand what I've asked in my letter. Next, Mrs. Ho, not here, Mr. Sin Chung Kai. Mr. Chairman, I'm interested in paragraph 17 of the paper. I didn't sit on the EA panel and I didn't take part in the earlier discussion. I'm concerned about the operation. The contractual operation period will be 15 years. And then the annual recurrent expenditure will be $72.4 million. I want to know whether it is a build and operate model or not, because currently you're asking for money to build the plant. I want to know who's going to collect the food waste. Say, for example, there's a Chinese restaurant which has got food waste. Are they going to pay you, or you're going to pay the restaurant operators for the collection of the waste, or is it neutral? But who's going to bear the transportation cost? Of course, the transportation would be most important, and there is also the operational cost. So please explain about the expenditure items. I don't think the construction cost is on the low side. But then for the 15-year contractual period, probably it will be quite profitable. Lastly, my question is, how can you be sure that for the 15-year contractual period, what will determine the price adjustments? Is it purely on the basis of inflation? Mr. R, this is a design, build, and operate contract. In other words, the tenderer will quote the design cost, building cost, and operational costs for 15 years. Now, currently, for the food waste from the C&I sector, they collect the food waste themselves and then they send it to the refuse or transfer station. In the future, those who generate food waste will send the food waste to our plant. The municipal solid waste charging scheme will also look at the charging of the cost. It will be considered in the future. I don't quite understand. Are you going to charge a fee? There will be a different implication whether you charge them for it or they have to pay you for it. Well, it would be the retailing industry, catering industry that will bear the cost. Mr. R, currently, if you send the waste to landfill, you don't have to pay a fee, and you don't have to pay a fee for dumping rubbish. Now, in the case of the MSW charging scheme, the Sustainable Development Council is carrying out a study together with us. In the case of food waste, if there is to be a charge, it will be pegged to the MSW charging scheme based on volume. So probably you're going to impose a charge on the catering industry instead of you paying them back. Well, for landfills and similar facilities, we usually have the design, build, and operate system. For the so-called gate fee, it is a government act, different and separated from the DBO. So in the future, if a charge is to be imposed, that will go into the general revenue. 15 years, starting from getting the tender, or will it be starting from day one of operation? Design, build, and operate. 3 phases. 15 years would be for operation. Mr. Chung, the fish feed plant can produce biogas. The biogas can be used to generate energy. It can provide sufficient energy for 3,000 households. Now, I want to know who can benefit from this scheme. You talk about 14 million kilowatts per hour of extra electricity. Will we get a sort of a subsidy for our electricity tariff, or will the money collected go to the general revenue? The electricity will be fed into the power grid. We are now talking to the power plant company, and technically it is feasible. Once we get the funding, we will take up the matter with the power plant again. So we'll talk about the money that we want to collect. It won't cause a pressure on the tariff. Mr. Chung, in other words, the government is going to sell the electricity to the power company. The revenue gained will go back to the general revenue. Yes, it will be regarded as a source of income. It will go to the general revenue instead of using it to subsidize the households. Though you say that it can supply enough energy for 3,000 households. No, we won't. Mr. Gary Chen. Mr. Chairman. Now, the daily capacity is 200 tons, but then 3,000 tons go to the landfill, so the scale is small. For we to be effective in treating food waste, the best way is to do it at the local level. I've always said that 1/3 of the population in Hong Kong live in public housing estates. I just wonder whether the government and the housing department can provide composting machines so that we can treat the food waste locally, and then the product can be used to green the area. That's the first question. Second question is that the Environment and Conservation Fund is currently subventing many similar schemes. Will the fund support private housing estates in the acquisition of such composting machines so that they don't have to wait for the completion of the OWTF? Secretary, thank you, Mr. Chen, for your question. Currently, under the fund, we do sponsor the acquisition of composting machines, but then they are sort of transitional and of small scale. This is because for such a portable one, it is still huge, it is very large in size, but then it can only accept the food waste from 100+ households. So the capacity is very much limited. You know that in Hong Kong we have a lot of high-rise buildings, but still we have been sponsoring such schemes because we want some housing estates to act as the pilot clients. In the long run, we believe that we have to divide Hong Kong into 5 or 6 regions, and then there will be a centralized food waste treatment facility. In Hong Kong, some private housing estates are using their own money to provide for food waste treatment. They collect their food waste, and then they will use it for animal feed. In the short term, we need to rely on the existing arrangement. We want to have the network of OWTF so as to have more people joining the scheme. I think for the Siu Ho Wan facility, it is going to be phase 1 of the scheme, to be followed by phase 2, etc. It is said that there should be a network of 5 to 6 OWTFs. Can you tell us about the sites selected? What about the one in Fanling and the one in Shaling? Now the first one will be in Siu Ho Wan Land Town. Second, Shalang in North District. The EIA study has been started. The third one, near Shek Kong in Yuen Long, they have just commenced the EIA. For the others, we're still working with the planning department to select the right location. We want the locations to be evenly spread so that they don't have to take a long trip. Mr. Chen, let me start with the smaller things. I think we need 3 days and still will be getting the same answer from the Secretary when we talk about a source separation of waste. Now for the design of Siu Ho Wan, you want to turn waste into energy. That will be the main function of the plant. When I moved the motion to adjourn, I said that throughout the world, this model has become relatively outdated. Yes, in places where there is a demand for electricity, the local circumstances would call for such a model to be used. But then in Hong Kong, in Tin Shui Wai, we have already got a privately invested facility. Food waste has been collected, and they have turned the waste into fish feed, and then the fish has been the fish have been fed on such feed, and then they eventually end up as sushi on our dining table.
So, if the government has completed its study and design, then it doesn't have to put up a cent. It merely provides the land and allows people to collect the waste, and there will be companies ready to do it. Now, you have to spend 1.5 billion and $7 or $80 million of recurrent expenditure. Now, that's not a sustainable way. Now, you do not have to pay, but you pay to create a big white elephant. Now, can you tell me how many places spend over $1 billion to build a kitchen waste treatment plant? Can you tell me what years and how it's done? Now, if we look at the UK, which is an advanced country in this regard, now in the past few years it has issued a document on how the UK looks at the future of anaerobic digestion. They will invest a lot of resources in it. Now, whether it's for power generation or biogas. Now, my colleagues recently joined a conference called C40 on the advanced countries of the world. It was held in Milan. There was a plant there on in the exact mode as ours, and they are very proud of it. When was it done? Maybe it was built 10 or 20 years ago. It's completed several years ago. Now, this is verbal creativity on the scale of C.Y. Leung. Now, people will be misled. Now, recently they built this plant, and they already set the direction for the whole country, and they see it as an advanced approach. If you are interested, we can provide you with the UK policy document. Do we have this in Southeast Asia, in Japan, in Taiwan? I will ask in the second round. In Japan, they mainly use incineration for kitchen waste. Now, Japanese representatives also took part in the recent meeting. They are looking at Hong Kong because they want to learn from us regarding this advanced approach. Emily Lau, I want to follow up on the document. The administration issued us a letter dated 26th of September, FC 153, 1314. Now there's an appendix on page 5 in paragraph 2. It says to avoid creation of waste at the source, to reduce kitchen waste. Now, in 2012, there is a Eat Smart initiative. Now, you work with the business sector. Now, how do you do it? Now, of course, the sector would want to make money. So, how do you get them not to make a lot of money? Now, if they don't make a lot of money, how can it succeed? Now, on food waste collection from supermarkets, restaurants, and so on, to be provided to the needy. Can you give us the figures? If you can succeed on both counts, then you are already reducing kitchen waste. Let us know the effects. Now, actually, at my opening comments, I talked about food donation. Recently, working through the Environment and Conservation Fund. We spent about $12 million to subsidize about 9 organizations. They are collecting about 900 to 1,000 tons, and they benefit about 600,000 people. So that's the progress in the past few months. When we report our progress to the rest of the world, they see us as being advanced. Now, and we work closely with the catering sector, including one in which Mr. Chairman has a stake. Now, they support this initiative against kitchen waste. We have this Eat Smart Charter. Now, some restaurants and hotels, they use our code of practice, and within a few months they reduce the kitchen waste by 10 to 20%. And we increase their participation. There is also an Eat Smart ambassador to pass the message to the operatives in kitchen and so on. And they also can communicate to their patrons so that they don't order unnecessary food. So there's still a lot of room for further scope. Can you further reduction? You reduce by 10 to 20%. There's an 80% room. Now, our initiative is to cooperate with the sector, with the industry, so as to reduce overall kitchen waste by about 10% in about 3 years. Why is it only 10%? Kitchen waste cannot be totally reduced. 10%, is that also the norm in other countries? Is it so low? No. Kitchen waste, now you have to reduce it firstly at source to avoid the generation of waste. Secondly, you can adopt food donation. And then thirdly, we have a kitchen waste collection to be dealt with in the proposed plan. And so the overall, with the 3 methods, we hope to reduce kitchen waste by about 40%. That is satisfactory internationally. Members have completed their questions in the first round. 2 members are asking for the second round. Leung Chi Cheung has pressed the bell, and also Cheung Kwok Chi. Cheung Kwok Chi. Thank you, Chairman. They are now spending $1.5 billion odd dollars. Now, very often the government projects run out of money and come back and ask us for more. Now, can you assure us that you won't come back for more money? Secondly, this is phase 1, so there will be phases 2 and 3. It seems we are unable to see when there would be phase 2 or 3. So you have dealt with 200 tons, you still have 800 tons more, and that 800 tons may increase. So how do you deal with the other 600 tons or the new increases? Now, if you have 200 tons per day, then you might have over 70,000 tons per year. And after that is turned into energy, will the waste then be devoid of any residue, or you have to deal with the residue, and how much would the residue be? We have a kitchen waste blueprint issued at the beginning of the year. We said that we have a network of kitchen waste plants in the 5 or 6 major regions of Hong Kong. So when we talk to other countries, we find that this is a good approach. One is in Lantau, one is in Xialing in North District, and then there's one in Shek Kong in Yuen Long, and we are trying to locate the other sites. Why is it that we adopt the Eat Smart initiative? Because there is a lot of kitchen waste in Hong Kong, so we try to reduce waste. So scholars support this approach. People around the world consider this an advanced approach. Now, as for turning waste into energy, this is done in advanced countries. If they have little agricultural demand, they will turn the waste into energy, either biogas or electricity. So there's demand for those in our city. A small amount is composted. The compost is not a major product, but the quantity can be absorbed locally, so it's not a large quantity. Mr. Chen, now on the residue, now there is a sieve mechanism. The glass and so on would be separated out, so there's a lot of residue left. Now mostly it's used for power generation, and the rest can be used for fertilizer. It won't be more than 20%, so it's only 20 tons per day. So the 20 tons, you would put that in the landfills. It depends on the quality. Now, if can be recycled, we would recycle it, and a small amount would be put in the landfill. Can you give us some assurance? Now, in our cost estimation process, we obtain the price figure. Now, if the FC can approve the project quickly, then we can work on the present costing to approve the bid. They're asking whether you can give a guarantee. Now, after the tender is awarded, according to the contract, there would be annual adjustment. So according to inflation, so in that case, we don't see the need to ask for more funding from LegCo. For Dr. Fernando Cheung, the project is to be for design, build, and operate basis. The government says it would look at cost effectiveness. Now it includes design, build, and operate. Now, given such a contract arrangement, they might try to adopt an approach that saves money, and then when it comes to operation, the expenses might be high, because some facilities, once invested in, would reduce future recurrent expenditure. Now, I'm not familiar with the technical side, because I've walked around in the Umbrella Plaza in the past few days. Now, there's a person who was fasting who he had some expertise, and he tells me that at the airport the design was good because it was of good quality, so the recurrent expenditure was low. Now, you adopt such an contract approach, you immediately look at the $1.5 billion upfront investment. Now, maybe the bidder would have an incentive to reduce the initial investment, but you would have to shoulder a high recurrent expenditure. Now, how will you deal with my concern?
I thank the member for his question. Now, the DBO approach is suitable for certain projects. For instance, at the airport, given the quality of the hardware that's required, a very high standard, so we adopt this tendering approach. Now, but for some projects like factories, we do not need to adopt very sophisticated standards, so we use the DBO approach. So we take into account the overall costs, including operating costs, so the concern would not arise. Now, when we adopt the DBO approach, we are aware that it does not the project does not require a very sophisticated approach. Now, the facility will last for 10 to 20 years, and that will be cost where the cost effectiveness comes in. Now, the $1.5 billion, as I understand it, will be in respect of the hardware. Now, the DBO contract, does it cover the operating expenditure? And you say that it has a usable life of 10 odd years. Now, will the operating expenditure be covered in the contract? Now, in the document FCR 2014 to 15 49, it already said that the annual operating expenditure will be $72.49 million. So already an upper limit has been set. Mr. Leung Chi-Cheung, many members have asked the question that I was going to ask, so it's just supplementary in nature. At the July meeting, I didn't quite understand some of the information, so the administration has provided more detailed information this time, so I will support this funding request. Now, I have a few questions, including on this project. I'm concerned about the future operational cost. After it's constructed, when kitchen waste is collected, the transportation by vehicles and the other expenses for collection, will those be shouldered by the government? And you said that over 60 jobs will be created. Now, do you have these figures on the recurrent cost? I will answer part of the question. Now, once there is a garbage levy, then the factories will deliver the waste to incinerator or whatever, and then in that case the business concern will shoulder the transportation cost. Mr. Chen, now on the wage cost, that's in Annex C. Leung Chi-Cheung, anything to follow up? None. Chen Yun-Han. Thank you, Chairman. Now, just now, it was said that in international conferences, countries like Japan consider us advanced. Now, my impression is that Japan all along has been ahead of us. They have different facilities for handling kitchen waste. Now you seem to be saying that Japan doesn't have a scheme like ours. How is our scheme more superior to what they have? Now, how about the money side? For such environmental infrastructure, there can be many considerations. Cost effectiveness is one. The impact on the environment is another. So we don't just adopt the cheapest approach. Now, the mainstream approach in Japan is via incinerator for different types of waste, including kitchen waste. Now, that's most convenient for them because they just built the incinerator, that's all. But that may not be the best use of resources, because the advanced thinking of the world is that if you can use the waste, taking into account what types of waste they are, like kitchen waste, you can use the anaerobic digestion method to better deal with the waste.
So composting can also be done, and that will benefit the nature. This is the whole consideration. But of course, Japan has its own mechanism. And about 20 to 30 years ago, they started to build incinerators. What did you say just now? You say Japan, what is it using now? They are now mainly relying on incinerators because they started such a policy 20 to 30 years ago. They rely on incinerators to handle all the refuse. But in the last 2 or 3 decades, people have had different thoughts. For example, you should sort the waste before incineration. In Japan, they do not do this, but if you can do this and if you can sort out the food waste, then you can also put it to other more efficient uses. Now Japan is reviewing its policy, and so that's why they think that our food waste blueprint is worth considering, because some of the incinerators are quite old already, so they are now thinking about the future direction, and I think our blueprint is pretty good because we do not have existing incinerators, so we can adopt new thinkings and we can sort waste before handling them. And now we are trying to build a network of organic waste treatment facilities, so that's why they think we are more advanced. I would like to ask you as well. I know that you are having some pilot schemes in estates, and some of them are in my constituency. It seems that the response has been quite well. So you are now adopting a two-pronged approach, and you will have OWTFs, and also you will adopt other measures. Ms. Chen, yes, we will adopt a multi-pronged approach because we have a huge amount of food waste every day. And the private sector, the government, as well as Hong Kong people can all join hands to solve this problem. Any other member would like to ask first round question? Mr. Alan Leung has come back. Well, I am always here, Chairman. Sorry I didn't see you just now. The Director of Environmental Protection Protection gave a letter to the Secretariat on the 26th of September 2014, and that's an annex. That's a vision there. They hope that by 2022, through establishing a network of 5 to 6 OWTFs, it is hopes that the 3,400 tons of food waste can be handled by at least 40%. And then paragraph 11 says that the private sector operators are welcome to take part in this initiative. 2022 is not too far away from us now. It's about 8 years. So how optimistic are we when it comes to building 5 to 6 OWTFs? The Civic Party has always been very concerned about this. Later on, we'll be talking about 3 landfills and 1 incinerator. So if you want to do something about food waste, we also want to know more. How confident are you in this project, and how can you reach your goals? Secretary, Chairman, Mr. Leung, we are now talking about the organic waste treatment facility. And now it's later than our original plan, because before the summer holiday we wanted to have the funding that would be within the tendering period, and now it's already late. So I really hope that members can pass this project so that we can start it as soon as possible. Mr. Leung, no question? I'm not sure about your answer. Secretary, what you mean is that you need to have the first one before you can build the remaining 5 or 6 OWTFs, right? Secretary, we have already identified sites for some other WTFs. The second one will be in Shaling in North District, and environmental impact assessment has already been done. The third one will be at Yuen Long near camping. Now we will start an EIA soon. Closer to the urban areas, it's more difficult to find a site. So now we're still talking to the planning department. We have been working very hard so that we can progress in accordance with our blueprints, but we are already a bit delayed now. There are some private sector operators who are interested in this, and you are communicating with them. How do you communicate with them? Maybe I can supplement. Now we made public our food waste plan, and we have already said that we will adopt a several-pronged approach, and we have already started a food smart scheme in order to reduce food waste at source. Please ask your questions in the next round. Dr. Kenneth Chen, for the OWTF, it can handle 200 tons per day, right? So it's not the ceiling, it's the average rate. So I would like to know more. When a company is awarded a tender, it will design and build and operate the OWTF. So for the performance of that company, will it be linked to its daily operation? For example, if it cannot handle 200 tons a day, then will there be a mechanism to regulate the company? So even though it can only get 50 tons a day, and then the next day 100 tons a day, then still is okay. So now you're saying that it's 200 tons per day. It seems it's quite concrete. But when it really operates in the future, would it be different? Because now we are approving the funding for it. Will there be factors that we have to take into account now? For example, in the last year, there was leakage at landfills, and we have heard that some wastewater treatment plants have the machines broken down and they cannot operate normally. So how would you look at the performance? I would talk about the handling capacity first. 200 tons is the ceiling. So government markets will be sending the food waste to it. And now we are mainly targeting the industrial and commercial sector food waste, and each day they generate 800 tons of food waste, so we are not too worried about having insufficient food waste. We have a fixed payment arrangement, and there are also some variable factors. According to DBO contract, well, actually, when we talk about the DBO contract, the EPD has a lot of experience. We have 19 of them now, so we already have very stringent mechanisms in place. We have demerit point systems, etc. This is a fair and open system, and we will monitor the performance of the operators so as to ensure that the facilities are up to par. I think you were just giving me abstract descriptions. I want something more concrete. When it comes to operation, we will look at the performance. It's very strict. We will also have our staff on site to monitor their operation so as to ensure proper monitoring. We will look at how they receive the waste, how they work on the waste, etc. Chairman, I'm still not too sure about his answer. Maybe I am not too good at understanding his words. But what kind of monitoring are you talking about? Will there be any penalty? Can you ask your remaining questions in the next round, Mr. Lee Cheuk-yen? Chairman, just now I wanted to give the Secretary a chance to explain himself. It seems that FTU and DAB said that you hadn't lobbied them, so that's why they didn't vote for you last time. I don't know whether under their threat you dare explain to us what happened. Now, if this OWTF is built, 200 tons is still a far cry from 3,000 tons. You are saying that you will be building 6 of this, but you can only identify 3 sites now. So I do not see a clear timetable and roadmap. You say that you have identified 3 sites, so that's not enough. If you have 6 sites, then at most you can handle 1,000 tons or so. And also here is a scary figure. Well, for the food waste generated in 2012 is 100% more than that generated in 2002. I think is really staggering. So can you explain why there is such a big difference? And the Secretary has put together an Eat Smart scheme. I think that's good, but do you have a target? We are talking about over 3,000 tons of food waste a day. So what's your target of food waste reduction? If you cannot reduce enough food waste, you will have a hard time handling them. I always think that it's very difficult to reduce food waste by merely promoting your ideas. Just now, some members have asked similar questions. For the Eat Smart scheme, we had a target that is in about 3 years' time, we want to reduce food waste at source by 10%. So that's the target of the scheme. We want to nurture such a culture. We have different ways of doing it. For example, we'll be putting together some charters with restaurants, eateries, and also we will be training the employees to become ambassadors. So in a few months or a year's time, they can reduce their food waste by about 10%. And we have already seen this happening, and this is quite encouraging. So for this kind of good practice, we will be promoting it so that more people can also adopt the practice. And to answer your question, yes, it is a challenge to identify sites in Hong Kong. We have already found 3, and now we are already at the EIA stage. So this is already a pretty good progress, but we still have to work hard to try to find 2 or 3 more sites. We are now cooperating closely with other government departments. We will have to adopt a multi-pronged approach. This will be a government-led initiative, but we also encourage the private sector to join us. There can be operations of different scale. You can do composting, you can do other things. The government welcomes all of this. Other than welcoming this, we also have a recovery fund. It's also waiting for funding approval by the FC. We will support the recycling of different recyclable materials. We try our best to achieve all this, including food donation. No other member is going to ask first round questions. We have 7 members who would like to ask second round questions. Dr. Helen Wong, Chairman. Well, for the Soho 1 plan, it will mainly be receiving food waste from industrial and commercial companies, and you will not be charging them. You just ask these companies to send their food waste to the Soho 1 OWTF, right? And now some OWTFs are charging people for sending them food waste. So why are we using more than $1 billion to handle food waste from the industrial and business sector? Now they are paying other OWTFs in the private sector to do it. We have visited South Korea. South Korea is working very hard in the recycling of food waste. Other than hardwares, they also have a lot of softwares. For example, they have a lot of good procedures, and they stipulate that you cannot use bamboo or wooden toothpick. You have to use a toothpick that's made from sweet potato powder. So how can you ensure that waste sorting will be done by the restaurants? Otherwise, the OWTF would have to do their own sorting to avoid other materials being included in the food waste. So you have to legislate, and in the area of softwares, how you can make sure that the private sector will be compliant.
Secretary, let me clarify. You are not quite right about the charging scheme. Currently, for the food waste from the C&I sector, they have to get a private refuse collector to collect the food waste to be sent to the landfill. The landfill doesn't impose a charge. But of course, we're consulting the public on the charging scheme for NSW. Currently, it is free. In the future, there will be a charging scheme. So, as to whether food waste will be subject to the same charge as other MSW, we don't know. Now, in 2017, the plant will be ready, more or less the same time as the MSW charging scheme to be introduced. And then there are 4 tactics. We have to look at the logistics. We need to carry out a study to cope with the situation in Hong Kong. We are different from South Korea. In South Korea, a lot of food waste has been collected to turn into animal feed. So they are concerned about the use of toothpicks. But then we will be turning waste into energy. Toothpicks are also organic, so it doesn't matter because we are not turning it into animal feed. So, but still, we are studying the logistics side of the matter. So we have a overall blueprint and we'll take a 4-pronged approach. Well, since 2001, we have a partnership scheme. We provide advice, and 1,500 tons of food waste have been collected. So the catering industry knows how to collect the food waste, and it is hoped that they can tie in with our efforts. I don't think there are members wishing to ask questions for the first time. So maybe I can sort of tell you what I think about food waste. I think throughout the EPD's mentality is entirely wrong. Now you have this design, build and operate approach. I don't see any incentives for anybody to save money for you. In order to claim credit, now you will get gas out of the process. Why would you want to go to Siu Ho Wan? There isn't any gas mains. The town gas cannot even try to buy the gas from you. You just want to be ambitious. You want to turn the waste into energy. Is it worth the money? What is even stranger is that not too far away from Siu Ho Wan, in my paper, I did ask this question. For Siu Ho Wan, less than 30% of the capacity of the treatment plant is being used. Of course, I'm not an official of the EPD. I asked a very ignorant question. I just asked why you didn't connect with Siu Ho Wan sewage treatment plant so as to supply power to them. You said that there is a EIA study and it has to be self-enclosed, and so you can't connect it with Siu Ho Wan treatment plant. But in fact, Siu Ho Wan's there is a sewage treatment plant in Siu Ho Wan. You have been criticizing the site selection at Tai Po. I didn't choose that, so I cannot claim credit. This is because the proponent thinks that it is very close to the town gas, and then there is a treatment plant nearby and then it can then be treated and passed into the ocean. Well, to be frank, I haven't really challenged you on the basis of my letter. We were talking about $600 per ton, and we were able to make a profit. Now, you will be spending $1 billion, and every year $72 million for the operation. Mr. Wong, it is in your baggage, because well before you get the job, long before you got the job, long before you accepted the offer, this was already decided. So I can't blame anybody. But then you seem to imply that you're going to change your mentality. You'll be more open-minded. But today you're still talking about shelling and other things. I just wonder how open you are. I don't know how many mains and pipes have been laid. Well, we want to be near to a landfill. If we are near to a landfill, we don't need to make a very large facility. 200 tons will be fine as the capacity. Now, we're not going to stand to gain from it, because I don't think I want to be engaged anymore. I'm just a small businessman. I'm worried given that you hold on to such a mentality. So, Mr. Wong, if you don't change your mentality, of course, I won't become the chairman again. And then if you come back with another request for $1.5 billion or $2 billion, I will certainly fight to the end. Mr. Gary Fan. You can use your round 2 opportunity to ask him. I've finished with my question. I don't want to break the rule. He has given a written reply. He was sort of very weak in talking about a change of attitude, but verbally he was quite firm in saying that he would have an open mind. How much time do I get? 3 minutes. Whether it's whether we're talking about this facility or other offensive facility, the government hasn't talked about any compensation. The government would merely talk about studying the matter and saying that it is difficult. In paragraph 13, it is said that 14 million kilowatt per hour of surplus electricity can be produced, equivalent to the power consumption by some 3,000 households. But then this will be sent to nearby government facilities. I just wonder whether you have ever considered, and it's possible for you to consider, giving priority to Lantau residents for the production of 14 million kilowatts of electricity, and ask the power company to offer this in exchange for locating the facility there, because you may have some adverse effects arising from the OWTF. So can you not use this as a breakthrough in the compensation policy? If you haven't thought about it, please do so. If you haven't, why haven't you considered it as part of this paper? Secretary. Well, when we talked to different people, of course, they came up with different ideas. When members went to Europe, you also asked the European officials and the local residents about the question of compensation. Well, I can say this. For the sinking in advanced countries, they have got something similar, that is energy into waste into energy. But even when they talk about compensation, they will look at the hardware. Say, for example, a heated swimming pool or a community facility. I think when members went to Europe during a duty visit, you asked a question along that line and you got this answer. As to the environmental impacts, we will work through a number of mitigatory measures. To answer the members' question, you have suggested that the energy produced should be given to the residents nearby. This is not the mainstream approach. In fact, it is not advisable. Different facilities would have different impacts on the vicinity. If you start to compensate for one, then there's no end to it. Members, time is up. The meeting is adjourned. There will be 2 sessions next time. We have to check with the House Committee as to when to start our meeting. Albert Chen, Frederick Fung will ask the second round questions. Thank you.